Hey, YouTube, welcome back to my channel. This is Nathan Daley. I am your law enforcement translator, you guys. Thank you for checking out this channel. You guys, I am doing a breakdown on the closing arguments in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. I'm gonna be honest, it was exhausting. It was exhausting. And I was really disappointed. I'm not gonna lie, I was disappointed. Now, they just finished the closing arguments, you guys. The jurors are gone for the day. They're gonna deliberate tomorrow morning at 9. They're gonna go over all the information, all the case, and they're gonna end up giving their verdict. Now, with that being said, let me highlight some key points, some key things during these closing arguments from the prosecutor side and the defense side. Again, because it's just finished and it's kind of late right now, I don't know if I'm going to integrate any of the clips like I've been doing prior to, but I will point out a few things that sparked my interest, and I'm going to kind of give you guys a brief little summary of what I thought, and I'm curious to hear what you guys thought if you had a chance to watch the closing arguments. I probably still will do a second video integrating the clips, but for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of give you guys a quick rundown. Now, let me start off with this. The prosecution side started first. This is Prosecutor Thomas Binger. Now, this guy, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't impressed with him during the trial. I think he did not do a good job prosecuting this case whatsoever, right? He had limited information, well, I won't say limited information, but he didn't really have a lot to go off of, right? He did not have, and there was so much overwhelming evidence that was a counter to what he was trying to present to the jurors. But in his closing, I thought he did an amazing job. His closing statement was phenomenal. And why do I say that? Remind you guys, at this point, this stage in the game, you are interacting with the jurors, right? Your job is to convey the message to them, make them a believer. This is a battle between two sides. So what is the key, right? The key here is Prosecutor Binger led with this whole idea of, in my opinion, the way I translated it was who felt fear first, right? That is the whole key to this thing. Who felt the fear first? Because depending on who you can point out to say, hey, this person felt the fear first, right? You can then create your argument and build off of that, saying that, hey, this person had the right to self-defense, this person did not, right? Who provoked who first, right? That's what he led with. That's what he stuck with. He kept it very simple. Why? Because he's talking to a group of people, right? We have a group of people with different education backgrounds, different life experiences. You have to, when you're speaking to the jurors, and there's no offense, you have to dumb it down, right? You have to dumb it down to the lowest common denominator. Why? Because your job is to earn their hearts. You got to earn the jurors' hearts. There's no way around it, right? All that fancy stuff that was done for the past 2 weeks means nothing if you cannot translate that and make it digestible for the jurors to process. I felt the prosecutor did a good job. Let me point out some things I thought was interesting. And then I'm going to tell you why I think he didn't do a good job on certain issues. My issue with the prosecutor was that he was taking actual events that you can see for yourself, and he was trying to turn it into something that it actually wasn't, right? For example, when he talked about the distance between Kyle Rittenhouse and Rosenbaum, when Rosenbaum was chasing Kyle, he kept saying, oh, he wasn't that close, he wasn't that close. Listen, no matter what side you agree with or disagree with, the reality is when you're looking at the video, it's close, right? It's difficult to try to argue something that someone can see for themselves. I would have stayed away from that. Why? Because you have 12 people who have to make a decision, right? And I might not agree with Kyle's actions and what he did. I might even feel like he did self-defense. But what I can say is, hey, no. I don't agree with it, but Rosenbaum was close. He was extremely close, right? They had a doctor who testified and said, no, he was in arm's reach, right? He was in arm's reach. You cannot argue the common sense evidence. And I felt like the prosecutor was really focusing on the common sense evidence that's very difficult to argue, because now you're trying to tell me how to think, right? When clearly I see for myself That is what I had a problem. And I think he failed in that area. And I think that's a very critical error, right? Because now you're assuming that the jurors are simple-minded and they can't see and make a common sense conclusion on their own, right? Hey, you guys, he wasn't that close. You're looking at the video like, no, he's close, sir. He was close. You cannot argue his proximity because the video shows it, right? I would have stayed away from that. So what does he talk about, though, that I thought was genius? He talked about how Kyle, as he was running initially, he turned around and pointed the rifle at Rosenbaum's location. Rosenbaum, they have on video, I guess you could say he throws his hands up, he pauses momentarily, right? Kyle admitted to it on the stand during cross. He said, yeah, I pointed my weapon at him. He stopped. I didn't think he was going to continue going after me. I thought that should have been enough. Well, during the cross, the prosecutor made a statement and said, well, how do you know that Rosenbaum in that moment did not fear for his life and felt the need that he needed to defend himself? I thought that was genius. That was genius. It was a genius statement, and it was very well played. Because what is the idea behind that concept? Is that who felt fear first? Who provoked this tension first? One can say, well, he was chasing after me. True. But then when you talk about imminent danger, imminent threat, right? The threat to receive severe bodily harm or death from an action or interaction, one would say, well, is chasing someone, does that evolve into needing to use deadly force, right? This is the argument he spun into in his closing argument, right? And I noticed this thing that he tried to do. He started to frame it very carefully, but he articulated it so simple to where the jurors can follow him, right? What did he say? Hey, listen, he's the initial, he provoked it. He turned around and pointed the weapon, right? This whole thing was just, hey, it's cat and mouse, right? I'm chasing after you. You can't assume that by being chased around in a parking lot that you're gonna die, right? Like, this is what he's kind of showing the jury. He's trying to spoon feed them to get them in the right mindset. That Kyle used deadly force inappropriately, right? And that this altercation should not have arisen him in a position to decide that deadly force was necessary. So then what does he say? You pointed the gun at me first. You changed the whole dynamic of the situation from cat to mouse to now you threaten my life. And now I have a right now to defend myself, right? But regardless, at the end of the day, if that was the case, one would also argue that why would you continue to approach someone or chase after someone when in that moment you felt in danger for your life? You could have easily have stopped. We could easily have removed yourself out of a dangerous situation, which you continue to pursue. So that is the downside to that argument, right? Because the common sense that anyone would have is, hey, if you felt scared, you felt threatened, you had an opportunity to disengage and you chose not to. The juror could easily sit down and say, well, Kyle did point that weapon at him. And by doing that, change the scenario to being a provoker. But then, okay, but why did Rosenbaum continue to chase him though? If Rosenbaum truly was afraid, then why would he continue? The juror can have that thought and say then, hey, Kyle then may have thought, well, I don't have any other options. But what I like that the prosecutor did was he focused on the idea that, okay, did Kyle try to hit him? Did he try to punch him? He went immediately to using his weapon. He didn't throw it to the side. He just engaged him with the weapon, right? They make a good argument. They make a good argument. The argument is, did you try to punch him? Did you try to push him? Did you try anything else? You immediately just went to the gun, and here's how I would have said it, right? A person can't get access to your gun if you're pointing it at them, right? So in a sense, you almost also put yourself in a more dangerous position by holding your gun out, pointing the gun at someone, right? That would have been my argument. That would have been how I would have sold it. to the jurors, right? If I was the prosecutor. What else did the prosecutor say that I thought was genius? He talked about the use of his deadly force, and he compared it with the other shots that were fired throughout the night, right? Kyle Rittenhouse had 30 rounds inside of his gun. He only fired 8 shots, right? Where the prosecutor made a mistake was he was trying to label Kyle as an active shooter. And you guys, listen, that word gets thrown around. It's a very specific word. Phrase. It actually means something. It has a definition behind it, all right? An active shooter is a person who was actively, indiscriminately taking lives, actively shooting without any rhyme or reason, okay? That wasn't the case. And so to use active shooter in this scenario is false. It's absolutely false, okay? So we have to be careful how we use those words. Now listen, what the prosecutor say and do that was genius? He talked about how Kyle shot Rosenbaum 4 times, right? But everybody else got 1 shot, right? The guy who jump kicked Kyle, he shot him once, right? He shot Anthony Huber once. He shot Gage Grosskreutz 1 time, okay? So the whole idea is that everybody got shot once, but Rosenbaum got shot 4 times. And see, this is something that he should have really hammered in during the trial when he was talking to the jurors. He saved this for the closing, which I thought wasn't smart, right? He should have been building on this in the entire time. Where did the prosecutor fail, right? In my opinion, he failed because he was too busy trying to make Kyle out to be something he wasn't, right? He was too busy focusing on moral arguments when he should have stuck to the evidence, the strongest piece of evidence that he had. His strongest piece, he should have stuck to it and hammered down on it for these weeks, right? Over the course of this trial. But when he noticed he was not making leadway, right? He had to switch his tone. He had to switch the direction. What did he say? He said, listen, you shot him 1 time. It hit him in the pelvis. It hit Rosenbaum in the pelvis. It caused him to fold, right? It crushed his pelvis. So as he was falling down, leaning forward, Kyle ended up shooting 3 more additional times. The bullet that actually killed Rosenbaum was the one that went through his shoulder, the top of his shoulder. It went down his back and it exited out his lower back, right? This is the testimony that the doctor gave. What's interesting about this is they're saying that's what killed him, right? People say he got shot in the back. He did not get shot in the back, right? So we have to be careful how we word these things. As he was leaning forward, because the shot to the pelvis caused him to fold forward, the bullet traveled, right, through his shoulder, down his back, right, down parallel to his back, and came out towards the lower left side of his back, right? So essentially they're saying, okay, at what point was he still a threat, right? See, now he's talking about Kyle's trigger discipline. Why is it you shot this gentleman 4 times and everybody else was 1 shot? You were very in control in these other situations, but in this one, you shot to kill, you did not shoot to stop. The prosecutor should have accepted the idea that Kyle was using self-defense, but he should have argued the fact that the defense was excessive, right? I feel like he would have had a better argument. He would have had a better argument. So what does he say? The prosecutor says it was excessive, right? It was excessive. And he argued with Kyle on the stand during cross-examination and said, listen, you intended to kill him. He said, no, I intended to stop the threat. Well, the threat had stopped the moment he started to fold. That's when it stopped, but you continued, right? Where did I think the prosecutor failed at? Again, he was disingenuous, you guys, with things that were common sense, that no one would even really probably argue looking at the video themselves. I believe they would come to the opposite conclusion of what the prosecutor was trying to get them to think. That is where I feel like he failed miserably. He shouldn't have done it, in my opinion. Why? For example, he talks about how as Kyle was running, he said, well, why'd you run? You didn't have to run. Nobody was chasing you. He's looking at the aerial footage that the FBI provided. And in that video, you see as those shots go off, people start to scatter out of the parking lot. He says, look, everybody's leaving. There was no threat. There was no threat at that moment. You didn't have to run off. You could have stayed there and provided help, provided aid if you felt that what you were doing was in the right, but you chose to run. And you claim that people were chasing you. No one started chasing you. And that's not true, right? That's absolutely not true. You can hear the people starting to gather. You can hear them starting to shout at him. You can hear them saying, hey, get him, get that guy, whatever they were chanting, right? So it was a disingenuous approach to try to sway the jury. But to me, again, I feel like that's bad taste. Why? Because it backfires. Because it's obvious that that's not the case. You used one video to show a particular situation, which was true, right? As people start to flee, you see another group that's actually closing in on him, which is what alerted him to actually run. What else did he do that was disingenuous? He talked about the guy, he said, the guy hit him over the head. We don't know if it's a rock. We don't know what he was hit with. Listen, but by trying to make that argument is disingenuous. Why? Because he was hit. He was struck. You know, again, you're not focused on the things, your strongest points that you can make to help get this conviction, you know? So those were the things that I had issues with, right? They talk about him getting hit with the skateboard. We know the skateboard's not a deadly weapon. Did it really, could he really did any damage? Again, these are all his opinions. But the problem again is that me as a juror, I might not agree with that assessment. Right? You swing a skateboard hard enough, yes, you can cause problems, you guys. Come on. You can cause problems. So I didn't think that was smart. I didn't think that was wise. And I thought that it really hurt the situation. And maybe not. But I don't like to argue common sense things because, again, you're dealing with people who are looking at things very straightforward, right? Very straightforward. Don't tell me how to think. Show me what it is and let me come to my own conclusion. Another problem is that, unfortunately, dead people can't talk, right? This is the biggest problem with these type of cases. The prosecutor tried to tell the jurors what Rosenbaum was thinking, right? Hey, you want to say that you felt in danger that Rosenbaum was going to take your gun and take your life. You don't know that. He wasn't going to do that. You know what I mean? Like he tried to lay that out. I would have stayed clear away from that. I would have stayed clear away from that. Because now you're trying to tell the jurors what to think. Again, I would have stayed clear. Because here's the reality. The reality is that Rosenbaum, they have evidence of him causing problems. He was a tyrant in the city that night. They have him setting things on fire, right? Causing havoc, breaking things. Right? They have him cursing, yelling, being extremely irate to other people, threatening people. He was a problem and they have the evidence to prove it. There's nowhere in this conversation, me as a prosecutor, am I trying to get the jurors to think that he was not a tyrant and imbecile, right? I wouldn't do it. Because again, this starts to now go against my common sense. You're now trying to tell me that I can't think for myself. And that, to me, is not a good approach, in my personal opinion. What else did the prosecutor do that I think was foolish? Now, the second prosecutor, the heavyset one, he did a horrible job. He did a horrible job. What was he doing? He wasted so much time focusing on things that were completely irrelevant, that did not aid in making their case at all, right? He was all over the place. He spoke about things that were non-factors, right? Where he should have been focusing on the two strongest points that the prosecution has, right? One, who felt the fear first, right? The excessive use of force, right? And Kyle shooting Rosenbaum, right? He didn't focus on that. Instead, he wanted to make these, in my opinion, petty arguments. And it felt like he was doing more complaining than he was informing the jurors. It was just a bunch of foolishness. And here's the thing. Even I was confused, you guys. And I know if you guys were to watch it, you'd be just as confused as I was. That's the problem, right? He just did not formulate well. Like, okay, I'll say this. He didn't paint the picture, right? He didn't paint the picture. And as your closing argument, your job is to paint the picture. If you guys caught the video, right? Black fear, white hearts. That was on the Ahmaud Arbery, right? Reference to Ahmaud Arbery, but it was an example of a flawless closing argument. I'll put the link at the top if you haven't seen it. Black fear, white hearts. Flawless closing argument. What did he do? He painted the picture. He told everybody to close your eyes. Imagine this, right? What's the problem with these guys in the closings? And I'm gonna talk about the defense. The first prosecutor, Binger, did a great job. Second prosecutor did a horrible job, right? Unable to paint a picture, right? You can't keep up. I couldn't keep up. I couldn't. It was out of sync. No sequential order of events. It was messy. Again, the second prosecutor wanted to speak for people who can't speak. He did so much speculation, right? And then turned around and told the jurors not to speculate, okay? He was putting thoughts in everyone's heads. Hey, this is what they were feeling. This is this. And he was just, what did he do that was correct? He focused on the imminent threat. He talked about imminent threat. He corrected and clarified the definition of deadly force, right? And the use of it, the use of self-defense. The person has to be an imminent. That's what he should have focused on. He should have wasted his entire hour talking about imminent threat. Was Rosenbaum an imminent threat? Was Huber an imminent threat? Was Gage an imminent threat? See, the prosecution doesn't have to win everything. They could have won some of the charges and may have lost others. And what I mean by that is they could have, say they articulated this properly and the jurors found that, hey, you know what? I don't believe the interaction with Rosenbaum was going to be constituted self-defense. We found him guilty on that, right? That's a win for prosecution. But then the jurors could turn around and say, you know what? But this engagement with Gage, Grosskreutz, I don't think so. I think this is reckless, right? I think this is going to be reckless. And we find him guilty on that. The prosecution is trying to win all the charges, and they're not going to win them all. I'm sorry, you guys. They're not going to win them all. They should have focused on the ones that they could win instead of trying to win the case, right? Now, let's talk about the defense. Now, in reference to the defense, we have Mark Richards. He's the lead defense on this case. I didn't like it. I think he did a horrible job. And for the opposite reasons, right? What did he not do? He lacked conviction, right? And to me, it felt like, again, there was more of a complaining than it was informing. Remind you guys, you're talking to people who don't really know the law. These are jurors, right? I had a hard time keeping up with the defense. No sequential order, all over the place, making arguments, complaining, instead of trying to educate and inform. Closing arguments means we're closing, you guys. We're wrapping this up. I could have did a better job. I could have did a better job than the prosecutor, right? I could have did a better job in the defense. Why? Because I understand people. I understand that I am talking to people who don't have a clue, and I'm trying to show them that, hey, listen, guys, this is what it is, right? Arguing, complaining, that's during the trial. That's in the early parts of the trial. This is the closing, you guys. I need to summarize this. I need to put this in a bow. I need to put a nice, pretty gift underneath. When you unravel it, you're amazed, you're accepting it, and you're ready to digest it, right? I didn't see that in the defense. I was not impressed with the defense. And they had such a solid case. It wasn't, in my opinion, I didn't feel like it was articulated well. I felt like he had a lot of aggression, right? I felt like a lot of the information was forceful. I felt like it was a little bit boastful, right? And this is just what I'm taking from it. And so But what did he do that was good? He was able to make good counter arguments, right? And in reference to the Rosenbaum shooting, he knows he has to nail the Rosenbaum. Why? Because if he can prove self-defense on Rosenbaum, he can prove and line up self-defense for the other two shootings, right? He talks about the common sense. This is the part I was saying in reference to the argument that the prosecutor made. He said, listen, guys, look how close he was. Look, here's 4 feet, right? It's 4 feet. So he was close. Now, he didn't mention the imminent part, right? Imminent danger. But what I do think that he touched on, he made reference to the idea that, hey, listen, you guys, common sense. What is he going to do? Take my gun, hand me a lollipop, you guys, right? He kept it real. He's like, common sense, right? So he's speaking to the jurors' common sense. Man, you can't mess with the common sense, man. You can't. Because at the end of the day, if you can reach a juror's, if you can reach here, right? You let the message do the rest. He talked about all the threats that Rosenbaum made leading up to this point, right? He talked about Rosenbaum's behavior. He was out of control. He was irate. Again, you guys, it's common sense. He's trying to sell the jury on common sense, right? And he's painting the picture that my client had a reason to fear for his life, right? Okay, yeah, he pointed the gun. It didn't stop him. At this point, you're like, yo, this guy's crazy. And then what does he do? He shows how during the altercation with Gage and Anthony Huber, he shows how everybody paused. Everybody else who didn't get shot had their hands up. They stopped, right? And that he only engaged people who were actively assaulting him. Now, the question is going to lie from the jurors is, even though he was being assaulted, does being shot at, is that an equal amount of force? Is it reasonable? Now, and what he said in truth to that is, listen, you don't have to get beat to a pulp before it's okay to use lethal force, right? You don't have to get your teeth knocked out before you're like, all right, you guys, you knocked 2 teeth out. Now I get to use deadly force. It doesn't work like that. The problem that the prosecution is having, they're trying to tell you what's on the mind of the person who's going through the actual situation, which is Kyle. You can't speak to his mind. You do your best to try to show people based off of evidence, but to tell you what he was thinking is not going to work, right? Because at the end of the day, this person was in a volatile situation. Whether you agree he put himself there or not, whatever, it doesn't matter. The reality is he was in a high stress situation. How do we know what he was feeling, right? This is why it all goes down to who felt fear first. Lastly, one of the biggest tools that I think he used is he slowed the video down. They had excellent video footage. He slowed the video down so the jurors can see step by step, right? What took place. He said, listen, he's being attacked, you guys. He's being attacked. And look at the level of attacks that are taking place, right? He points everything out. The same video we've been seeing slowed down. He makes a very simple argument. One thing, though, that he said and did that I don't agree with, that I think might be taken the wrong way. Now, I don't know what the jurors are thinking, but he kept saying that Kyle had privilege to use deadly force. Bad choice of words. Words matter, you guys. Words matter. I would not have used the word privilege. It just doesn't have a good connotation behind it. Specifically because he's white, right? He's white. You got to be careful with these words, right? You got to be careful with these words. He was privileged to use deadly force. No, he's not privileged to use deadly force, right? Let's be real. He's not privileged to use deadly force. That's not the picture that you want to paint if you want to get a non-guilty conviction. He kept using that word. He was privileged to use deadly force. No, he wasn't. It's not about privilege, right? Bad choice of words. And again, with the defense, I don't think he did a good job at all. I didn't. I couldn't follow well, and I was taking notes, right? And I know if I was having a hard time, people who are watching are having a hard time, the jurors, it wasn't put in a way to where it was easily received and digestible. And that's the issue that I have. Not for a closing argument. It was a horrible closing. Anyways, you guys, that's it. I'm going to try to edit this as quickly as possible so you guys can get it tonight. I hope you enjoyed the information. Let me know your thoughts. Is he guilty? Will he be convicted? Let me know what you think. If I have time, I'll integrate some clips. All right, so you guys can kind of see. Because it was long. It was like 8 hours. But anyways, have a good night, you guys. God bless. We'll pick this up tomorrow.